Okay, everybody. This is Unit 7, Lesson 75. Alfred Russel Wallace and Evidence for Evolution. The evidence for evolution will continue into the next lesson, but we're going to get started today. Give me a moment to jot down the title. All right. So I want to ask you guys a few questions and see if you can get to what I'm trying to convey to all of you. What city in this country has the largest population? In other words, what is the biggest city? New York City, almost 9 million people. What city is the second most populated? What do you say, Philip? What do you say, Alex? Nelson? What do you say? Anybody else? It's actually Los Angeles. Very good. Chicago's number three. I think Philadelphia or Houston's number four. One of those four, one of those five. Where in this country is the largest Mardi Gras celebration held every year? New Orleans. Almost everybody said that. Where's the second largest? And don't say Tampa. That's Gasparilla. And don't say Universal Studios because that's just silly. Where's the second largest? No one cares. No one. I don't think it's going to go New Orleans, Dunedin. It's St. Louis, Missouri. Not that anybody cares. Here's another one. I was born in 1985, and the first presidential election that I was alive for was when Ronald Reagan won his second term. Who'd he beat? Who was his second place? No one cares. When I was a junior in high school, the Bucks won the Super Bowl, first Super Bowl in their franchise history. Who'd they beat? Some people know the Raiders because you know your football, but just the average fan, I don't know. The Lightning won the Stanley Cup my senior year of high school. Who'd the Lightning beat for their first cup? One person knows, the Minnesota hockey guy. All right. So my point is, it's kind of like what Vin Diesel said in Fast and Furious. Second place is the first loser. No one really cares whether you're first or you're last. You win or you don't. Okay? You remember when we were watching Gattaca, how upset that the real Jerome in the wheelchair was that he got a silver medal for swimming? It's like I was never made for second best. First loser. This is the first loser when it comes to evolutionary biology. His name is Alfred Russel Wallace, and today we're going to give him his due credit. Okay? So I do want to give you guys a bit of a history lesson today. So we're going to talk about Charles Darwin, who was older than Alfred Russel Wallace by 14 years. Charles Darwin was born in 1809 and he died in 1882. It's approximately 73 years. And then Alfred Russel Wallace, who was born in 1823 and died in 1913. Now, this is going to be a story about natural selection and evolution. When we first started Unit 7 several weeks ago, I asked you guys, when you think of evolution and you think of natural selection, survival of the fittest, who's the first person that comes to mind? And so many of you said Charles Darwin, Charles Darwin. Yeah, he was the first guy. When you think of gravity, like what scientist is credited with discovering gravity? I hope I didn't get that on video, Emerson. The guy that was sitting under a tree and had an apple fall on his head? Isaac Newton. Okay. Would you happen to know who is credited with inventing the light bulb? I'll talk about Thomas Edison shortly, just as an example. Emerson. All right. So, diversity of life on Earth is due to evolution. That's just a fact. But what has been debated as to how it happens. It is a fact that Philip is here in class today. No refuting that. How he got here, well, we could talk about it. He walked to school, he biked to school, he scooted to school, he drove to school, he Ubered to school, he rode the bus to school. There's so many different ways he could have gotten here. There's so many ways that life could change. And that's what's been a hot point of debate for a few centuries. But the one that these two fellas, Darwin and Wallace, are focused on, a mechanism of which is natural selection. Now, last week on a previous lesson, I taught you guys the 5 factors that cause evolution. Natural selection is one of them. Can you recite the other 4 for me to make me feel good about myself? One at a time. Go. Gene flow. So we got natural selection. We got gene flow, which is migration. What else? Genetic drift, which is random changes to the allele frequency. What else? Mutation, permanent changes to the genetic code. One more. Non-random mating, selecting mates with preferable traits over other potential mates. Good. So we're not going to talk about all 5 of those. We're just going to talk about this one. And Darwin was the guy. Whenever we think of natural selection, we think of Darwin. So we all know that Darwin was on the HMS. What was the name of the ship? It's named after a breed of dog. The HMS Beagle. He traveled the world for 5 years. He visited Australia. He visited Africa, South America, the Galapagos Islands. 5 years. Well, what happened afterwards? Darwin did research on evolution and refined his work without publishing it for decades. We're talking more than 20 years. He just kind of held on to it. Why wouldn't he release his work? Well, Darwin realized what I've realized in my life, and you guys are 16 to 18 years old, so I don't know if you realize this yet, but when humans are presented information that runs counter to how they interpret the world, they tend to do one of 3 things. I've just noticed this from my time on this planet. They tend to fear it, they tend to hate it, or they tend to ignore it, like deny it ever happened. Think of climate change. When I was in high school, and even before that, if a hurricane was strengthening in the Gulf or in the Caribbean or in the Atlantic, it would take days for it to maybe fire up to a category 4 or 5. When Hurricane Milton was coming our way, it went from a tropical storm to a category 5 in less than 24 hours. That is unheard of. Now, the life force of a hurricane is warm water. When it is over warm water, it can get really powered up. These hurricanes are powering up faster than they ever had because the water is warmer than it ever has been. That is a sign of climate change. The world is heating. These natural disasters are becoming exacerbated. Longer floods, longer dry seasons, longer fire seasons, stronger hurricanes, tornadoes, you name it. And if you go out about it, if any of you set up a table in front of Publix and you just had a big sign that says, let's talk about climate change, you're probably going to get 3 categories of people. You're going to get some people who are afraid of it. You're going to get some people who hate it, like they think it's bogus. And you're going to get some people who just deny it's even real. It's like the tooth fairy to them. So Darwin realized this in the 1800s. So why would he sit on his work and not release it and just become famous? He was afraid of the reaction it would provoke. Humans thought for the longest time that the Earth is the center of the universe. And then we found out it isn't. That didn't go over very well. Galileo discovered that. He was thrown under house arrest for the rest of his life for simply stating a fact. The Earth is not the center of the universe. When we found out the Earth is not flat, people were in an uproar. It changed how we perceived the universe. So given that history, Darwin's thinking, well, I have evidence. I have proof that life changes over time, and I know how it happens. He probably wasn't going to go over very well. So he just kind of kept it to himself. So sometime later, Darwin was at home, and he received a letter from a man, a nobody, some Joe Schmo, named Alfred Russel Wallace. Now, Everybody knew that Darwin had gone across the world on the HMS Beagle. He did talk about what he saw. He talked about how he saw a variety of life forms, and he saw life forms in Australia that he didn't see in the Galapagos. And he saw life forms in South America that he didn't see in Africa. And he just kind of explained how life was different across the world, but he didn't get into how. So that was public knowledge. He was kind of a pseudo celebrity. Wallace, on the other hand, had been conducting his own research in the Malay archipelago. Now, I know a lot of you took AP Human Geography when you were freshmen, and I hope you at least have some sense of the world that you live on. The Malay archipelago is the massive group of islands that's between Asia and Australia. It also goes by the name Oceania. It's all of this. Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, Borneo, New Guinea, all this place. Australia's right here. That's the top of the island. So this is where Alfred Russel Wallace was. And Alfred Russel Wallace was going from island to island to island, and his big thing was butterflies and beetles. And something that Wallace noticed when he would go from island to island to island is that the insects were different. See where I'm going with this? Why do I see a pink butterfly on island number one, and I don't see pink butterflies on island number two? How come I see yellow butterflies with black spots? Why am I seeing different life forms on different islands? And it finally hit him. These life forms are adapting to their environment, and there are selective pressures within the environment that are selecting in favor of certain traits and selecting against other traits. And knowing that Darwin had visited all these places, the Galapagos included, another different archipelago, he's like, hey, Mr. Darwin, I'm in the archipelago in Southeast Asia, and I'm really noticing a lot of differences in life. And I'm starting to see that nature and all the forces therein are shaping life according to the environment. Now, before I publish my work, I just wanted to pick your brain and see if you saw the same thing when you were bouncing around the planet on your voyage, on your expedition. And obviously, you've been to a few places. I just want to see if you happen to notice what I'm noticing. Now, imagine Darwin sitting at home like this, having his life's work in front of him that he's kind of kept to himself. And then some guy out of nowhere has announced he has discovered the same thing. So, Kellen, you said a moment ago that when you think of the light bulb, who invented that? Thomas Edison. Imagine Thomas Edison is sitting at home. He has a light bulb in his house. He just hasn't made it public. No one knows about this yet. And then he gets a letter from some guy saying, excuse me, Mr. Edison, I'm about to release my new invention that can illuminate a dark room. And I wanted to just see if you could confirm that I'm doing this right. How do you think Thomas Edison would feel? Probably a little jealous, feel like somebody's going to steal my thunder. And no one remembers second place, do they? No. So Wallace's letter expanded on his observations that, here's the big one, that species change over time. What do we call that? Evolution. And they adapt to their environment due to the selective pressures they're in. What is driving the evolution in this? That's called natural selection. So, yeah, Darwin freaked out. This was 1858, by the way. You have your life's work, and some guy has just cracked the code to see what you see. So this was 1858. In 1859, less than a year later, Darwin published his work as a book. And the book is called On the Origin of Species. And the rest is history. And there's a reason why you guys said Darwin when we started Unit 7. This is why we call it Darwinian evolution. And we don't say Wallacean evolution. And if you wanted to, check this out. Let me switch screens here on the video. Where did I put the internet? Hold on a second, guys. There it is. On Amazon, right there. You can actually buy the book, The Origin of Species. Makes for a great coffee table book. Origin of Species, not too expensive at all. That's the great thing about books is they're pretty timeless. You just preserve it. But yeah, you can buy that book online if you were so inclined. Yes, Ava. You what? I do not know that for sure, so I cannot confirm nor deny that. All right. So yeah, Wallace was obviously a little, I guess you could say, disgruntled by this, but there's the haves and the have-nots, and I kind of find it ironic. Do you guys remember what aspect of natural selection I told you is my personal opinion into thinking is the greatest driver of natural selection? Competition. Darwin felt fine sitting on his couch at home until a competitor jumped in and then he got off his butt and published his work. So ironic, isn't it? All right. Now, Alfred Russel Wallace did have a major contribution to evolutionary biology. And it's called biogeography. And I'll define it in just a few minutes from now. But just kind of a basic definition is that biogeography, you can translate the word. What does bio mean? Life. What does geo mean? Earth. It's the distribution of life across the planet and how life adapts to its own little corner of the world. It also helps us explain how life and the planet have changed over time. If you look at this visual, when I went to Google and I Googled biogeography and then I went to images, this is a picture that always comes up. All of you know about, many of you probably know about Pangea. Pangea, the supercontinent where all the continents were together. One big continent, one big ocean. That was not the beginning, that was not the end. That was only about 250 million years ago. Earth is 4.4 billion years old. Pangea was only around 250 million years ago. So it's just a little blip on the radar. This is before this is after Pangea. When Pangea broke up into two parts, this is called Gondwana. Gondwana was composed of South America, Africa, India, you can see Madagascar right in there, Antarctica, and Australia. And these little streaks of color indicate the fossil remains of ancient life forms that have been found on multiple continents. If you look at this one, this is a prehistoric crocodile that has had its fossilized remains found in South America and Africa. How in the world could you have the same creature found in two different continents? Today, Africa and South America are separated by what ocean? The Atlantic Ocean. Once upon a time, the Atlantic Ocean didn't exist. If you look at how South America and Africa are topographically shaped, South America kind of fits right in there. Once upon a time, the Atlantic Ocean didn't exist, and then the plate tectonics started to separate them. The Atlantic Ocean was sort of like a river, and to this day, it's still getting wider. So see if you can figure this out. If the Atlantic Ocean is getting wider to this day, what ocean must be getting smaller? The Pacific on the other side. You have a plant species that has had fossilized remains found in Africa, South America, Madagascar, India, Antarctica, and Australia. That leads us to conclude that these land masses were once connected and these life forms were found all across those land masses. Now, if the Earth had never changed, if the world that we know it as today on a map has always been the way it was, there's no way that you would find the exact same plant species in Australia, Antarctica, and South America. But the Earth has not always been the way that we see it now. It has changed. If you could look in the future, and I think YouTube has this stuff, AI can project what it's going to look like, what the Earth will look like in 250 million years. It will look like nothing as it looks now. It's always changing. Every time you hear an earthquake, land is moving. All right, so that's biogeography. We will come back to that. I'm going to pause the recording now because I want to show you guys about a 5-minute video of just give Alfred Russel Wallace his 5 minutes of fame. So I'm going to pause it right now. Okay, so we just watched a little 5-minute video on Alfred Russel Wallace, and let's start to conclude your lecture with the second part, which will carry over into the next lesson, and that is evidence for evolution. And this will carry over to next class. There are five major tenets of evolution, evidence for evolution. We were going to go over them one by one tomorrow, but I want to get you started and have you know them today. And make sure you know all five. You never know what might pop up tomorrow. You know what I mean? Yeah. Yeah. All right. Number one, biogeography. Now, I've been teaching this class for more than 10 years, and I'll tell you right now, the one that, of these five that I'm about to present to you, the one that's forgotten the most is this one. You have been warned. It just slips people's minds. Biogeography is the distribution of life across the earth and how life adapts to unique environments. You know, the life forms that you're going to find in Australia are going to be different than the life forms that you see in Asia. What's up with that? Number two is comparative anatomy. This is also called homology. Now, in high school, we have a class called human anatomy and physiology. But if any of you go to college, there is a class called comparative anatomy, or when I was in school, it was called vertebrate form and function. Here's my textbook. On the cover of the book has a fish, a mammal, a bird, an amphibian, and a dinosaur, which is a reptile. These are all vertebrates. And in that class, we had to compare how all vertebrates have very similar anatomy, which is how they're built, and physiology. Remember that homo means the same. This is the study of similarly evolved structures and common structures in different species thanks to common ancestry. Now, I'm unfortunately not going to be able to pick this up on the video, but what I'm holding in my hand is a human arm. It's a model. So when you guys are ready, look up at this. Anybody here taking human anatomy yet? No? All right, so let me give you a little crash course on the human arm anatomy with the skeletal system. The bone I'm holding right now is your humerus. It connects your shoulder to your elbow. The two forearm bones are your radius and your ulna. Your radius is the one that does not have the elbow. Your ulna does have the elbow. Here are your wrist bones. They're called carpals. You have 8 of them. These are your metacarpals. They're your hand bones. You have 5 of them. And these are your phalanges. These are your finger bones. Your 4 fingers have 3 phalanges. Your thumb has 2. 14 phalanges, 8 carpals, 5 metacarpals, a radius and ulna, and a humerus. That's 30 bones right here. Now, our arms are evolved for kind of hanging on our side. We grab things, we can hang from the trees, we can hang from a branch, we pick things up, and so on. I want to compare them to other forearms of vertebrate species. So look at that. What you're looking at are the forelimbs of a dog, a bird, and a whale. An animal that walks on its arms, an animal that flies with its arms, and an animal that swims with its arms. All these animals have the exact same bones. They're just a little differently shaped. That's called modified for their lifestyle. Whales have fingers. Birds have fingers. Dogs have fingers. When I was in vertebrate form and function, we had to dissect a cat. And we had to tell the professor every single muscle in the forearm, every single blood vessel in the forearm, because it's the same thing as us. You guys have a bicep, tricep, and deltoid in your upper arm. So do all the other vertebrates. So do the turtles outside in the pond. That's comparative anatomy and physiology. Now, structures that do have a common kind of design are called homologous structures. We're going to go much more in depth with these tomorrow. Remember that homo means the same. These are structures with common features and common evolution. There is a reason why all of you had the same bones and muscles and organs as the turtles in the pond outside my classroom, because you share a recent common ancestor with those turtles. If you go back in time far enough, it's there. And you have the same bones they do. You have the same bones as a tiger. You have the same bones as a eagle. All those things. Because those are homologous structures. Like the arm of a human is homologous to the arm of a dog. On the other hand, there are analogous structures. These are structures that might have the same function, but they're evolved differently. Structures with common function, but uncommon evolution. Nelson, you have legs, right? What do you use your legs for? Walking, running, standing, jumping. So does a crab. But Nelson's legs have skin and hair and bone, cartilage, ligaments, tendons, blood vessels, nerves. Does a crab leg have all that? No. A crab leg is meant for walking. Nelson's legs are meant for walking, but a crab leg is evolved far differently than a vertebrate. That's what we would call analogous structures. And then we have vestigial structures. Vestigial structures are structures that once had a function, but they've lost that function. Can you tell me some vestigial structures in your own bodies? Yeah. Wisdom teeth, when you would use them to eat really rough and tough food. Well, we don't eat rough and tough food anymore. We have microwaves and ovens and we can cook. You don't need those extra teeth anymore. Probably your appendix. Your appendix had a former digestive system function, not really much anymore. I'm going to teach you a few more tomorrow, like the muscles that cause you goosebumps or the third eyelid in your eye, in case you never knew about that. We'll do that tomorrow. All right. The third piece of evidence is the fossil record. The fossil record serves as the remains of ancient species and how they evolved into new species. When dinosaur skeletons and fossils were first discovered a couple hundred years ago, they were named dinosaur, which translates to terrible lizard. Saur or saurus, tyrannosaurus, stegosaurus, brachiosaurus. That means lizard. Because when they were first discovered, they had a big old tail, claws, teeth. Ooh, it's like a big crocodile. But as we found more and more species of dinosaur, we realized these things are more like birds. It took a long time for that to happen. We could see their evolution over time. Most of you are 16 to 18 years old. If I looked at a picture of you as a baby, and then as an infant, and then like a 3-year-old, and then kindergarten, then 4th grade, then 6th grade, then freshman year, then junior and senior, I could see how you have changed over time into who you are now. The fossil record expands on that with millions of years. Like tomorrow, I'm going to show you the evolution of a whale and how it went from a land creature about the size of a bear to whales we know of today. That's all due to the fossil record. Within the fossil record, we have transition fossils, which are basically referred to as the missing link. Like dinosaurs are actually transition fossils between reptiles and birds. And we can also identify extinctions in the fossil record when one species stops and then new species appear. That could be due to extinction. I'll expand more on that next class, but I'm trying to get through these 4 classes over. Number 4, comparative embryology. Comparative embryology is all about similarities in gestational development. That basically means when you are inside your mother and she's pregnant with you, you are gestating inside your mom. You're growing, you're developing. Similarities in gestational development between species with common ancestry. Tomorrow, I'm going to show you the embryo of several vertebrates, like an alligator, a dolphin, a human, chicken. And I'm going to challenge you to try to pick which one's which. Like Philip, I'm going to have about 5 embryos. So I'm going to say, which one's the human? Don't feel bad when you say, I don't know. They all look the same because we have a common ancestor with other vertebrates, very recent common ancestor. And then finally, number 5, last one. This is the newest one and the most irrefutable. Molecular homologies, or just molecular homology. Similarities in the genetic code, which is your DNA, between species. Philip, what do you think you have DNA more in common with? A whale or a shark? Why is that?
Well, you were talking about whales, so.
What kind of animal are you? What is a whale?
Oh,
Okay. A shark is a fish. Now, do you share a common ancestor with a whale? Do you share a common ancestor with a shark? Yes, you do. You have a spine, so do they. But which one do you have a more recent common ancestor with?
whale.
Yeah, and the DNA can prove that. All right, you heard that bell. I'm going to end the lesson now. We will continue this lesson tomorrow.